I know, this video is late. Sorry. I was busy fighting crime. Not like actual crime, but like jaywalking and shit. Anyway, after months of waiting, we finally have concluded the first installment of the Legend of Korra comic series. Just to recap, I liked part 1 and really enjoyed part 2. Now with part 3, I'll be honest, it comes to a relatively satisfying but kind of rushed conclusion. I would say that I enjoyed the overall story, but I think that the storytelling falters a bit in this new installment. In part 3 of Turf Wars, Korra, Lin, Mako, and Bolin team up with the Creeping Crystals to find Asami and Tokuga. While this is happening, the Airbenders have set up a peaceful protest at the Spirit Portal. This protest puts President Raiko in a position where he doesn't know what to do and further showcases his inept leadership skills. Asami is forced by Tokuga to make an airship based on one of her father's old designs so that Tokuga can drop poisonous gas on Republic City and force himself into political power. That's all I'll say without spoiling the conclusion. All that is fine in concept, but a little clumsy in execution. For example, the corporate tycoon who owns the land that the Spirit Portal is on has a change of heart in this, which feels kind of random. I can understand that he may be grateful for what Team Avatar does for him, but it's very inconsistent with his portrayal in part 1. This isn't totally out of nowhere for the Avatar universe, but more often than not, these sudden changes in character are used for comedy, but here it's used for drama. I could accept it more if his initial plan wasn't as shallow as an amusement park, and if there was a little more character-informing conversation between him and Asami. I'm not against the idea at all, but it feels rushed. Another problem I have is that the Creeping Crystals gang just kind of comes and goes in this comic. In part 2, it felt like they were building up to more, but all they really did in this was lead Team Avatar to Tokuga's hideout, and then they kind of just disappear. Maybe they'll come back, but I don't know, it felt like there should be more of them. Speaking of Tokuga, I don't really get his motivation. At first he just seems to want revenge, but then it looks like he wants to take over the city. He's kind of a shallow villain. It doesn't bother me too much, because one of Legend of Korra's weaknesses was the lack of minor villains. Almost every villain introduced in the series was a big player in the season's plot, so it's nice to have just a run-of-the-mill thug for Korra to go up against to re-establish her as a competent badass. The thing is, all the people who are warring over the turf in this comic are used as tools to initiate a conflict rather than being interesting characters themselves. And for what it's worth, it is a legitimate conflict as it is interesting, but the reasons for it don't add up as well as I would have liked by the end of it. Out of all of them, I think that Tenzin and the Airbenders' peaceful protest is the most interesting and the most relatable. It is a good way to put President Raiko in a difficult position, and I can understand both sides of that issue more so than the others. Another small issue is that when Korra is talking to her father, it almost seems like they are implying that Korra's dad wasn't okay with her being bisexual, which doesn't make any sense at all because he was totally fine with it. All he did was let her know that not everyone is as accepting. I really don't see the issue with that. The only other complaint I have about part 3 is the lack of some establishing shots, the most jarring being when the airship carrying the poison enters the spirit world. There is no wide shot of the airship in the spirit world. Now, to be fair, it does show the airship approaching the portal, but the lack of establishing shot meant it took me a second to realize that we are now in the spirit world. The rest of the comic is quite good though. The character interactions in part 3 are still great. Team Avatar acts exactly like they did in the show. Mako and Bolin's back and forth was very much the enjoyable banter we've come to expect, especially with Bolin's little joke towards the end. Once again, it feels like the creators cater to fans a little bit as Mako references the bizarreness of having one of his exes date another one of his exes. This has been a bit of a meme in the fandom since the show's end, and it's pretty amusing to see it referenced by the actual creators. Oh, Mako, you poor bastard. At least you still have Prince Wu. I really love the political angle they take with Julie and Varric. Varric's passionate campaigning is just so entertaining and is such enjoyable satire. The conclusion with Korra and Asami is a little rushed, but the romance in the Avatar universe has always been one of the weaker elements, so the writing here is just keeping with tradition. I'm used to it, so it doesn't bother me that much. The action in the comic is quite good, and it carries over that feeling of teamwork from the animated series very well. None of the major characters feel wasted here, only the comic book ones, which I don't mind too much since I'd rather see characters I don't know be wasted than characters I've come to love. It's hard to say if the characters introduced in this comic are really wasted though. They serve a legit purpose. They just aren't as interesting as past characters. It's not bad. In fact, most of my problems are based off what we could have had rather than what we got. which I don't think is really fair because I feel that what we got is still quite good. The final score for the Legend of Korra Turf Wars series is an 8 out of 10. When I look at this objectively, it's a solid continuation of the show, and it pushed some social issues that they may not have been able to tackle as heavily under Nickelodeon's restrictions. The characters feel just as alive in these static images that they did in the animated series, and their individual arcs all feel right. It falters a little bit at the end with a rushed conclusion, and the inconsistency of the artwork can be distracting. But for the most part, it shows that the creators have a good idea of where to take Team Avatar in the future. I will say, I am pretty excited for the new comic coming out in May of 2019. Not only will it include more of Kuvira, but it will also feature a new artist. On top of that, production of a live-action Avatar series is underway for Netflix with both Michael DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko attached. So who knows what the future holds, but I look forward to checking it out. So what did you guys think of the Turf Wars series? Did it satisfy some of your questions after the end of Season 4? Or did you think that they missed some marks? I'm open to hearing other arguments. I'm Ranting Spider-Man, and I'll see you guys next time.